October 12th. I'm 5 feet tall. My favorite food is steak. My favorite color is blue. My best friend is Aaron Larson. And my newest friend is Gabe.
This is the last video record of Jacob Wetterling, an 11-year-old boy who disappeared in 1989. His search was one of the largest missing person rescue operations in United States history.
Wetterling was abducted at gunpoint last night while riding his bike with two other boys.
He grabbed Jacob and then he told me to run as fast as I could into the woods or else he'd shoot.
New evidence tonight leads the FBI to believe that Jacob Wetterling's kidnapper may have struck before.
Jared Scheierl, who was also kidnapped and assaulted in 1989, just days before turning 13, was instrumental in solving not only his own case, but also a series of attacks on other boys in Minnesota, including Jacob Wetterling.
This crime was so horrific in nature, and it's gone on for 25 years.
How many psychopathic pedophiles can exist in a 20-mile radius?
I want answers. I want to know what happened.
I'm going to give it 110%. If the answer's out there, then I'm going to find it.
Jacob Wetterling lived with his three siblings, Amy, Trevor, and Carmen, and his parents, Patty and Jerry, in St. Joseph, Minnesota. He disappeared on an October night in 1989.
It was a chilly but not too chilly October morning. We got up, Jacob and I went fishing, and then came back for a noon kickoff for the Vikings game. It was kind of a family tradition, watching Vikings football.
That night, Jacob's parents went to a dinner at a friend's house, about 25 minutes away. They would return later and planned for the children to stay home while they were out.
We were in the middle of dinner. Trevor calls, asked Patty if he and Jacob and Aaron could ride their bikes down to the local convenience store and rent a movie.
There's nothing between us and the store. It's farm field mostly and a few houses. But it was starting to get dark and I said, no, find something to do. We've got plenty to do.
But the children insisted. They convinced Patty and Jerry to let them go to the store with their friend Aaron if they took flashlights and came straight back home afterward. St. Joseph was a very quiet place, and the Wetterlings thought the children would be fine, as long as they were careful with traffic.
It must have been about 45 minutes. The phone rang and they called for me to come and take this call, and it was our next door neighbor who called and said, "You have to leave that party right now and come home."
He came back to the table and said, we got to go. And I said, you know what, aren't those kids back yet? And he said, somebody took Jacob.
Patty and Jerry were horrified. They rushed home and found Trevor and Aaron in a state of shock.
Trevor was just agitated. And I remember Aaron was like hiding in the corner, biting his nails. He just wanted to disappear. They had witnessed something awful.
I want you to give me anything you can recall about this male party that approached you guys, okay?
He was like a man, sort of big. He had like a, was this for like nylon thing as a mask?
You know what color it was?
Black.
The children tearfully explained what happened. After picking up a movie at the store, Jacob, Trevor, and Aaron started to ride home on their bikes. But then, Aaron heard a sound coming from the side of the road.
It's kind of tall grass. A kind of a shiver went through me, and I didn't know if it was, just the wind or an animal, but just something didn't feel right. And I just remember the first thing I saw was kind of the flash of the gun.
A masked man threatened the children with a gun, forcing them to get off their bikes and go into a ditch. At first, they thought it was just a high school student playing a prank, but they soon realized how terrifying the man was. He said he would shoot them if they didn't lie down in the grass and turn off their flashlights, so they obeyed his orders.
The silhouette probably sent chills down my spine to hear his voice again. And he asked Trevor to look at him and tell him how old he was, same with me, and then same with Jacob. And then, he told Trevor to run as fast as he could in the woods or else he would shoot. And then Trevor was gone maybe 10 seconds. He basically did the same thing with me and told me to run.
Trevor and Aaron ran as fast as they could, knowing that the man could decide to shoot them at any moment. They looked back, hoping to see Jacob following them. But both Jacob and the attacker had disappeared. Trevor and Aaron ran back to the house to ask for help. They escaped safely, but had no idea where Jacob was or what the man intended to do with him.
I was the last person, with him. You have that guilt of he should be here and I shouldn't be here.
The Wetterlings were devastated and desperate for answers about where their son was and who took him. Trevor and Aaron gave as many details as they could about their attacker. The search for Jacob became one of the largest searches for a missing person in United States history. As the days went by, no one could find him, but the Wetterlings' best hope might come from another victim, a boy named Jared Scheierl.
There were details that I recognized right away. Description of the voice was similar. There was a number of details that were pretty consistent to my case.
Jared Scheierl lived a happy life with his family in the small town of Cold Spring, Minnesota, a short distance from the Wetterlings. Before Jacob's disappearance, he went ice skating with his friends. Afterwards, they had milkshakes at a cafe. What started as a typical night quickly turned into a nightmare. When it was time for the boys to go home, Jared said goodbye to his friend Corey.
There's a little alleyway out back, and we walked through the alleyway. And the one thing that I will always capture was Jared asked me to walk him home, and I said no.
Jared said goodbye and started walking home alone. But when he didn't arrive on time, his family began to panic.
Where the hell would he be? It doesn't take an hour to get from the restaurant to the house.
No one knew where Jared was. But after a long time, after saying goodbye to his friends, his parents saw him running towards the house, distressed. He said he was attacked, and the man who did it was still out there. His parents called the police, and Jared had to relive his traumatic experience in order to have any hope of catching the man who did this to him.
It was probably 9:30 when I started walking home. A car approached me. I just started giving this guy directions. The man had got out of the car. He grabbed me. He said, "Get the f*** in the car. I have a gun and I'm not afraid to use it."
Jared obeyed the man's orders, doing everything he could to survive. He studied the car as much as possible, hoping he could escape and use the details later to help capture the attacker. He noticed there was a police radio inside the car. The man made Jared pull his hat over his eyes and lie in the back seat, but still, he paid attention to every turn they made. The man turned onto a gravel road and stopped the car. Jared was taken over by fear when the man approached him. Then, the 12-year-old boy was sexually assaulted in the car. When it was all over, Jared was terrified, wondering what the attacker planned to do with him next. But to his surprise, the man took him back to Cold Spring, a short distance from the Scheierl's house. He returned Jared's snowsuit, but kept some of his other clothes and threatened the boy before letting him go.
He had said, "It's okay to talk about this, but if they come close to finding out who I am, I'll find you and kill you."
The attacker told Jared to run. If he turned around, the man would shoot. Jared ran home, desperate to get away. After going through an unimaginable attack at such a young age, it's up to Jared to explain what happened. He tells the police all the details he can remember about the car and the man who assaulted him, hoping to help them catch this monster. Jared says he was wearing camouflage and tells about the police radio inside the car. He even directs them along the route they drove.
It's sad to picture it, but in order to do that, I had to lay in the backseat of the squad car with my eyes covered and just go off my memory.
Shortly after Jared's kidnapping, the police identify a possible suspect, Danny Heinrich, a former member of the National Guard. He has had other run-ins with the law, such as thefts. He also has some drunk driving fines, and during a stop, a police officer noticed that he had a police radio in his car, just as Jared had described. In a photo lineup, Jared identifies two men who he thought looked like his attacker. One of them was Heinrich, but he can't narrow it down to a single suspect, and the police can't charge anyone. Jared has to go home knowing that the man who assaulted him and threatened to kill him is still out there.
I think I slept on my parents' bedroom floor for the first year. The level of fear that you go through, the emotions, anxieties that you learn to overcome.
Jared thinks he is the only victim of the man But later that year, he hears about the kidnapping of Jacob Wetterling in the neighboring town of St. Joseph, and immediately notices the similarities with his own kidnapping. Jared wonders if it could be the same culprit, and wants to do everything he can to stop him and help find Jacob. Jared works with FBI agents to make a sketch of the man who attacked him. They see similarities between the sketch and Danny Heinrich, and soon after, the FBI takes Heinrich in for questioning. They ask where he was on the nights of Jared and Jacob's kidnappings. He has no alibi for either, and agrees to give his shoes, a hair sample, and his car tires. The shoe and tire marks left at the scene of Jacob's kidnapping are similar, which helps the police get a search warrant. Once inside Heinrich's house, they find radios, black boots, camouflage pants, and even pictures of boys. However, the police let him keep the photos, and they leave. Almost a year after Jared was attacked, the FBI compares fibers from his snowsuit with a fiber sample from the car that Danny Heinrich was driving. He is arrested for probable cause for the kidnapping and sexual assault of Jared. FBI profilers help put together the interrogation. They even fill paper folders and write Heinrich's name on them, trying to intimidate him and make it look like they have a lot of evidence. But in reality, they need him to confess. They keep him in custody overnight, but he denies everything. The prosecutor decides that they don't have enough evidence to charge him with anything, and they have to let him go. Suspicion grows, and while they can't prove anything yet, Jacob's family refuses to give up their fight to find him.
We are constantly looking at this case. We're not going to put it in a drawer. We're not going to forget about it. We are going to stay committed to getting this resolved. We owe that to the Wetterling family and the community to get an answer to them.
When your case gets cold, the only person that can keep it in the public eye is a loved one. And they have tried to do that, and Patty has never stopped trying to keep Jacob's face out there.
I never want to have to look Jacob in the eye and say, you know, I wanted to keep going, but I got tired, or it was so long. We never quit, ever.
Jared's family decides to move out of the town where he was attacked, hoping to help him move forward and feel like a normal boy again. They want to protect him from all the pressure and also from the attacker, who is still free. They move to another town, hoping that life will become more peaceful. But Jared and his family have no idea of the horrors that are already happening there, and they won't find out for more than 2 decades. For years, Jared's case and Jacob's kidnapping remain unsolved. It seems that there is no hope of finding Jacob or catching the man who took him. But more than 12 years after the kidnappings, a blogger will make a discovery that will change everything.
I was looking for something new to write about, and a story came on the news about the Jacob Wetterling case, and I thought, what happened here? You know, how does a kid just disappear from here?
And she's got the benefit of not being law enforcement, so people will talk to her differently, and she keeps uncovering things.
I spent a lot of time at the library and online and going through old newspaper articles. And I figured out early on that I really wanted to talk to this guy named Jared.
In 2013, Joy Baker gets in touch with Jared. She found a newspaper article about a series of kidnappings and assaults on boys in another town, a short distance from where Jared and his family moved after his assault. Starting in 1986, 3 years before Jared and Jacob's attacks, there were several reports of a man terrorizing children. He followed children riding bikes or simply walking around town. He then grabbed them, asked their age, and assaulted them before letting them go. The police never managed to stop the man or find out who he was. But Joy Baker thinks these assaults may be connected to Jared and Jacob's kidnappings. When Joy talks to Jared, he is shocked. It's the first time he hears about these other cases.
25 years later, and I had learned this from Joy. You can't imagine my eyes when I had seen that and just thinking, I live here.
For Joy and Jared, it seems very similar to their kidnapping, and even the FBI agents had not connected the cases.
They asked me to send them the article. They weren't aware.
If we could have found them and piled up cases of abuse by him then, to me, it's just something, again, where we failed. It still bothers me.
Because of the work that Joy and Jared did, the police are able to investigate Jacob's disappearance more deeply.
Within the first week, I talked to one of the victims and just got details of his attack. And they knew who I was, they were comfortable talking, and it led to a domino effect.
They get a search warrant for Heinrich's house. They don't find evidence about Jacob or the attacks in the other city, but they find folders of child pornography.
That initially was the reason that drove me to the amount of investigating or researching that I have done, is the fact that I am a parent now. I couldn't fathom having to go through that or experience their sense of loss.
Heinrich is arrested on child pornography charges. But while the investigators believe he took Jacob, they still don't have definitive proof. They will never know where Jacob is or what happened to him if Heinrich doesn't confess.
They said, the good news is we have your guy. The bad news is statutes of limitations exist in your case and we cannot prosecute him. That made me feel like I've worked hard to find this answer, and I get the answer, but I don't get prosecution. It's not fair.
In a desperate attempt for answers, they make a shocking deal with him. If he shows where Jacob is, then he will not be charged in his case. They will also drop all child pornography charges, except one, U.E.S. Attorney Andrew Luger thinks it's the only way to get the truth, and Jacob's family agrees to offer the deal to Heinrich. Heinrich accepts the deal.
We had belief, but not evidence. So my job, under all of these awful circumstances, put him behind bars for a long time and get the answers that this family and the state of Minnesota have been looking for almost 27 years.
Was it a hard decision?
No, not really. For nearly 27 years, we've been looking for Jacob. We wanted to know, where's Jacob?
After just 10 minutes in court, the prosecutor asks if he kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and killed Jacob Wetterling. He calmly replies, "Yes, I did." He goes on to explain what happened when he took Jacob. After assaulting him, Heinrich thought he saw a police car patrolling nearby. He panicked and shot Jacob. He also confesses to the kidnapping and sexual assault of Jared and leads the police to a place on the outskirts of the other city, where he buried Jacob's body.
It was actually absolutely stunning to try and process. How do you shift your head from hoping and searching to now knowing he wasn't alive?
Because of the deal he made, Danny Heinrich is not charged with Jacob's murder. But in 2016, he is sentenced to 20 years in prison for child pornography. He will be over 70 when he gets out. Jacob's death is now a painful reality. But finally, the families have the truth about what happened almost 30 years ago. And Patty Wetterling says they almost feel a sense of calm.
I want to say, Jacob, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly painful to know his last days, last hours, last minutes.
That gunshot snuffed his breath out, but his spirit is so strong, you can just see how it affects people.
He's taught us all how to live, how to love, how to be fair, how to be kind. He speaks to the world that he knew, that we all believe in, and it is a world that's worth fighting for. His legacy will go on. We love you, Jacob.
Knowing that Jacob is not suffering, Jacob's parents created the Jacob Wetterling Foundation, now the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, a program that helps families of missing children. They also worked to pass the Jacob Wetterling Act, which required states to establish sex offender registries. Patty Wetterling served as board chair of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and today she is a well-known advocate, never stopping her work to protect children and help other families.
We're fighting for our children. They have hopes and dreams, and it's our job to find them. We can never give up, ever.
Without Jared Scheierl telling his story and his work with Joy Baker to get justice, the Wetterlings would never have known what happened to Jacob. Today, the Wetterlings are close to Jared and Joy, who help bring answers to many families who have been struggling for decades.
I'm grateful for the level of support and encouragement that I've received along the way. This is another step towards closure.
I give Jared all the credit in the world. He's come forward and said, I think it's the same guy. I want to do everything I can to help Jacob. I hope some other people realize how brave Jared really is.
I also want to say one huge shout out to Jared and Joy. Jared had the courage to stand up and say, this happened to me, and there are others.
We really did just adopt this man. He was so incredibly, powerfully part of our resolution.